Good morning. Today we continue to talk about justification. What is justification? How does justification work? And today I'm going to show you that someone that cannot sin can also be justified. So that means justification is not that you are made righteous, especially in the light of our definition of righteousness that we have looked at. So if you just stumble onto this video on YouTube, please do yourself a favor, go into Dynamic Love Ministries on YouTube, go to our devotional tab or devotional playlist and listen to the previous 3 days devotionals. It will revolutionize your way of thinking on righteousness. You will truly feel righteous, and you will also have a heart and a mind that expects justification, and you will be a partaker in the justice of God towards those whom He has promised. It will really bless you. It will change your way of thinking. It will bring power to your relationship with God. Now, today we're going to look at the word justification again. To be justified means to be proven as in the right, to give evidence that a person is righteous. In other words, you are not becoming righteous in being justified. You are righteous separate from justification. That means if God promises you something, the right thing to do in relation to the promise or in relation to God is to believe. When you believe, God comes to the conclusion in His own mind, and this is what the word means, the word logizomai, which means to be counted. When Abraham was counted righteous, it simply means to reason it out for yourself, to calculate in one's own mind. So God made a promise to Abraham, and then Abraham believed God, and he reasoned it out in his own mind that this person is righteous. And then He vindicated Abraham's belief. He vindicated Abraham. Abraham was like a fool in the eyes of the world, believing in the only true God, and said, my wife is going to have a child God promised me. And many years went by and nothing took place. And God looked at Abraham, looked at his faith and said, well, this person truly believes me. He is righteous. He didn't say, well, he's not righteous, and then counted him as righteous in the sense of that he's not. He says he's really righteous. And then God vindicated him. And he found that Sarah was pregnant and a son was born as God has promised. So Abraham was righteous. How was he righteous? By the law? No, by believing God. And that's the same thing for us. We're not righteous by the law. We are righteous because when God promised, we believe Him. I've spoke in depth about that yesterday. Now look at how justification works. So God justified Abraham, and the word justify means, and if we look at the Greek here, it means to prove that someone did the right thing, or to prove or to exhibit or to show evidence of righteousness. Now it says in Luke 7:29, and all the people that heard John, and and all the people that heard him and the publicans justified God. Now, I mean, if justification means to make righteous, if you're not righteous, then it would be impossible for publicans and sinners to justify God. But here we find that they justified God. It says, and all the people that heard him and the publicans justified God, being baptized with the baptism of John. So what did they do? They said, well, we have now logizomai. We've looked at what Jesus said. We looked at what John the Baptist said. If we read this, we find from Luke 7:24. And let me just read this quickly here. Didn't plan to read this. Then Jesus answering and said to them, "Go your way and tell John what things we have seen and heard, and how that the blind see and the lame walk and the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear and the dead are raised. To the poor the gospel is preached. And blessed is he whosoever is not offended because of me." And when the messengers of John were departed, he began to speak unto them, to the people. And then Jesus preached on. And then it says, "And all the people that heard him and the publicans justified God, being baptized with him with the baptism of John. But the Pharisees and the lawyers rejected the counsel of God against themselves." In other words, so there was a counsel of God against themselves. They rejected the counsel of God, so they came to the bottom line conclusion in their own mind that what is said unto them is not righteous. It's not the way it ought to be. But they were publicans and sinners, and they reasoned it out for themselves, and they calculated in their own minds that what is being said here is the right thing, and then they justified God. In other words, they publicly did something whereby they said that God is right, and they were baptized with the baptism of John. So we can see that God can be justified. And we find that Jesus Christ was justified. Now, was Jesus a sinner? No, he was not a sinner, but he himself was also justified. And let's look at that verse. That is in 1 Timothy 3:16. Let's read from verse 14. "These things I write unto you, hoping to come to you shortly. But if I tarry long, that you may know how you ought to behave yourself in the house of God, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and the ground of all truth." So he says, listen, I wrote all these things to you so that if I don't come quickly, you know how to deal with certain things. Then he's got this beautiful ending here. It says, "And without any controversy, great is the mystery of godliness. He was manifested in the flesh, justified in the spirit, seen of angels, preached unto Gentiles, believed on in the world, received up into glory." So it's talking about Jesus here. It says Jesus was manifested in the flesh, justified in the spirit. Now, how was Jesus justified in the spirit? Can Jesus be justified? The word here for justified means vindicated. Vindicated and justified is kind of interchangeable. So Jesus was justified in the Spirit. How was he justified in the Spirit? Let's go to Romans 1 verse 4. It says, "And he was declared to be the Son of God with power according to the Spirit of holiness by the resurrection of the dead." So if we go back, we find that this justification in the Spirit, seen of angels, preached unto the Gentiles, believed on in the world, received up in glory. It all talks about the resurrection. So Jesus believed that God is the only true God, that he can only live by the words that come from the mouth of God. He didn't rest on his own ability. He didn't trust in his own flesh. He didn't lean upon being a descendant of Abraham. He leaned upon the faithfulness of God, and he believed God. So God in his mind looked at Jesus' faith and obviously said that this man is righteous. He's righteous. Why is he righteous? He's believing God. And then God vindicated the Christ. How did he vindicate the Christ? How did he justify the Christ? He proved that Jesus was in the right and that he is the Son of God. When Jesus believed that he's the Son of God, when he believed that he's the Messiah, when he believed that he's from the Father, when he believed that the prophecies speak about him, when he believed that when the temple will be broken down in 3 days, he'll be raised from the dead, was he in the right or was he in the wrong? Well, the world said, let's murder him. When they murdered him, to them it was simply proving and justifying themselves, saying, well, you see, if this guy's truly the Son of God, then we will not be able to kill him. So let's kill him, and then we justify ourselves. We prove that we are in the right. How? By crucifying the Christ. But then God proved that the Messiah was in the right. By what? By bringing forth what the Messiah believed into manifestation through the resurrection. And he was seen of angels, seen of the messengers. He lived on the earth for a certain amount of days, and then he was taken up into glory. And then he poured out the Spirit, which is his life, on those who believe, so that the righteous, the believers, can be vindicated or justified with the Spirit that raised him from the dead, by the Spirit bringing forth fruit in their lives. So justification then would be the manifestation of fruit in people's lives as God is vindicating your faith, because we are now partakers in the justification of Jesus. Well, you'll have to listen to this again. There's a lot in this message, but tomorrow we'll talk more about that as we close up this week's devotionals. God bless.